Part 2, the Revolutionary War. The war is going to move to the south. And like I mentioned, this is going to be a little more difficult because the majority of the British loyalists live in that area because they're making great profits in trade with Great Britain, and it's not to their advantage, in their opinion, to have independence from the mother country. Now, the British decide that they want to gain control of the south. That's why the war is moving to the south, is because the British is pushing it to the south. And instead of continuing the battle in the north, they're going to try to gain control of the south, and once they gain control of the south, then they're going to go back up and fight in the northern part. Now, the British believe it's going to be easier to capture important ports and agricultural centers located in the south, again because of the large number of loyalists that live there. Okay? And I told you the reason that so many loyalists live in the south is that merchants are making great profits because of their trade with Great Britain, and the loyalists in the south have nothing to gain from independence from Britain, only losses in their profits with trade. Now, the British concentrated on trying to control southern seaports. And early in this fight, they had no problems occupying two very important seaports. The first was Savannah, Georgia. Savannah, Georgia, which was captured in December of 1778. And the second one they captured in May of 1780 was in Charleston, South Carolina, where American General Benjamin Lincoln was forced to surrender that port city of Charleston and about 5,000 troops. So that was a big loss. Okay? So Charleston, South Carolina fell in May of 1780 when American General Benjamin Lincoln was forced to surrender that seaport along with 5,000 troops. That was kind of a major loss for the colonists there. So the two seaports that were easily taken by the British in the south, the one at Savannah, Georgia, and the one at Charleston, South Carolina. Now, the reason they wanted to take those two seaports is it would be their British fleet would be able to move when and where they wanted as they pleased throughout the south. That's where they're going to base their operations, is out of those two seaports. Okay? So from these bases, the British were able to move where and when they pleased throughout the south during this campaign. Okay, basically what British forces did is they just simply raided the countryside in those two areas. Okay? They plundered, they burned, they terrorized the patriots that lived in both Georgia and South Carolina, and before long the entire colony, not only the seaport, fell to the British. Okay? So basically the British just terrorized from Savannah, Georgia and Charleston, South Carolina. They plundered the countryside, they burned everything, they terrorized these patriots into submission, and so it didn't take long before the American colonies of Georgia and South Carolina fell to the British. And who's joining the fight against the American Revolution? American loyalists. Okay? Matter of fact, by 1780 it was estimated that about 8,000 American loyalists were fighting against the American Revolution. That's quite a lot of people that are saying, hey, we're going to fight for the British. About 8,000 American loyalists were fighting against the American Revolution by 1780. So not only were we fighting the British, we were actually fighting, in a way, our own people. Okay? Because the South was not interested in separation. Now, I'll tell you who had to step up in the South to help the Patriot cause were just normal civilians. Just normal civilians had to help in the South. And one of those civilians will be another person that nobody knows in history that was very important, and that was Nancy Hart. Nancy Hart. She's going to be one of these civilians that's going to have to step up and join colonial forces to win in the South. Nancy Hart. Now, Nancy Hart was a mother of 8 children. And she was what we call an unspoken patriot in the South. What does that mean, Charles, if you're an unspoken patriot in the South?
No one knows about her.
Right, and she doesn't want anybody to know about her because of the situation with so many loyalists there, right? So if you're an unspoken patriot living in the South, it means that you're undercover. You don't want them to know your views, okay? Now, she lived with her family in the backwoods of Georgia. Lived with her family in the backwoods of Georgia. And she was left alone with her children. Why? Where's her husband? In the militia. Very good. He's fighting in the Georgia militia, trying to, hold on in the South. So Nancy Hart was left alone with her 8 children because her husband was fighting in the local militia. Now, she was a tough old broad, I'll tell you, a raw-boned frontier woman. She certainly had no trouble looking after herself and her children when her husband was gone. And between her chores and tending to her children, she served as a patriot spy. She served as a patriot spy in between caring for 8 children and their homestead while her husband was gone. Now, do we have very many women spies? No. So she actually disguised herself as a man. She was about 6 foot tall. She had a little bit of a masculine appearance about her. She was a bigger boned woman, so to speak, stocky. And so when she went out as a spy, she disguised herself as a man, because they would never believe a woman spy at the time. And she would cross into a British military camp and she'd pose as a loyalist man. She would actually disguise herself up and pose herself as a loyalist man. And she'd get information. And she'd gather this information from the camps and she'd relay it to the Patriot side in the South. That's what she did. Now, even though she wasn't a spy, Nancy Hart was often harassed by local loyalist militia. Always given a bad time because what was her husband doing? Fighting for the Patriot militia. So the local loyalist militia harassed her quite continually. And one time it got kind of ugly because they showed up and accused her of harboring a Patriot rebel in her home. In other words, hiding a Patriot rebel in her home. So the loyalist militia shows up. They accuse her of harboring a Patriot rebel in her home. They confront her. And she refused to cooperate at first, even though she wasn't harboring anyone. She had no Patriot rebel there. But she wasn't going to cooperate with these loyalist militia. She didn't like them. Well, they decided they would intimidate her because of her lack of cooperation. So one of the loyalist militia shot one of her own turkeys and forced her to clean, cook, and feed it to them in a very threatening way. So one of the loyalist militia goes out and shoots one of her turkeys, which ticked her off, and then forced her to clean the turkey, cook the turkey, and feed it to them. Now, she's not resisting doing this. Why? What's she in fear of? Her 8 children. So she goes ahead and she cleans this turkey and she cooks it. And as she's cleaning and cooking it, she's trying to come up with a plan to protect herself and her children because she's concerned about what they may do to her 8 children. So as she's cleaning and cooking this turkey, she's trying to come up with some sort of a scheme or a plan to protect herself and her children. What she decides to do is she decides to try and get these loyalists drunk and try to disarm them so she can send for help. So she's going to get them liquored up, hopefully get them drunked up and try to disarm them. So she comes up with this plan to try to get the loyalists so drunk she can disarm them and send for help. Well, the loyalists, who are not too afraid of her, stack up their muskets by the door and they continue to drink more and more spirits, as they called them in those days, and they eventually got off their guard. Okay? So the Loyalists stacked up their muskets by the door, and as they drank more and more and more spirits, their guard went down, and she started sneaking the muskets out of the door to her daughter. So while they weren't paying attention, she'd take a musket, sneak it out the door to her daughter, and then sneak another one. That's how she was going to disarm them. Well, it goes pretty good for a while until one of the Loyalists discover her, and she grabs one of the muskets that was still inside the door, and she yells, "Stop! The first one who twitches, I shoot stone dead." I mean, this gal was pretty tough. So as she's sneaking these muskets out, they see her, and she grabs one of the muskets and cocks it back and yells, "Stop! The first one who twitches, I shoot stone dead." Well, she basically, they don't believe her, and one man moves toward her, she shoots him down, grabs another musket, and holds these guys off until her husband arrives back home from the militia. So one guy, she tells him, "I'll shoot you stone dead." One doesn't think she will and makes a move towards her. She takes the musket, shoots him dead, grabs another musket, cocks it, and she's able to hold these guys hostage until her husband gets there. What do you think her husband wants to do as soon as he hears the story? What's he want? What? He wants to shoot him down. He's going to line him up, shoot him down. Okay? And she says, "No, no, that's too good for them. I want to see them strung up." That's what Nancy Hart says. Her husband wants to shoot him down. He's going to shoot down the Loyalists on the spot. She will not let him, saying, "No, that's too good for them. I want to see him strung up." And that's exactly what her husband and his helpers did to those Loyalists. Hung them all. Hung them all. Now, the point being is that loyal patriots like Nancy Hart step up to the plate in the South, and they're going to slow down this British invasion. And she's one example of citizens that stood up and took a stand, even though they were very outnumbered. Tomorrow, we're going to tell you about a very unusual battle. I want you to kind of write this down and set yourself up. On October 7th, 1780, we're going to have a battle in North Carolina called the Battle of Kings Mountain. On October 7th of 1780, we're going to have a battle that's fought in North Carolina called the Battle of Kings Mountain. I think the result of that battle will surprise you a little bit and set us up for another time in American history that's going to approach about 80 years from this point. Okay? The Battle of Kings Mountain, October 7th, 1780. Okay, perfect.